Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. President Trump says the U.S. has reached a trade deal with South Korea. He also discussed fentanyl tariff reductions for China, the stability of the Gaza ceasefire, and a third presidential term. The government shutdown becoming more painful for regular Americans. What are the latest messages from Republican and Democratic leaders? House Republicans released a report claiming the Biden administration's use of an auto pen proves Joe Biden wasn't actually making decisions while president. We discussed this with a legal expert. Power demand is up and rising. With it is nuclear generation in the U.S. Analysts are projecting it will increase by nearly 30% in the coming decades. President Trump plans to raise the issue of imprisoned Hong Kong pro-democracy activist Jimmy Lai in his upcoming meeting with Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping. We discussed the significance of this with a friend of Jimmy Lai. An update on the $100 million Louvre jewel heist. 2 suspects in the heist have confessed, but the jewels are still missing.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
And good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. President Trump is in South Korea today, meeting with President Lee Jae-myung and other key regional leaders. NTD's Daniel Monahan has highlights from his trip and speeches.
The Star-Spangled Banner played for Trump as he stands in salute. Trump was awarded South Korea's highest honor, the Grand Order of Mugunghwa.
I'd like to wear it right now. Thank you so much.
And President Lee Jae-myung gifted Trump a Korean treasure, a Chunmachung gold crown.
The Chunmachung gold crown symbolizes the divine connection between the authority of the heavens and sovereignty on earth.
Trump joined a meeting with President Lee.
There's a great love between our communities, between our people, between leadership, and we're all friends. I know you showed me a picture from a long time ago of you and I, and you're looking better now than you did then. That was quite a while ago, so you're doing something well.
President Trump said he knows the Korean peninsula remains technically at war and vowed his administration will work to straighten things out.
I know Kim Jong-un very well. We get along very well. We really weren't able to work out timing. We have President Xi is coming tomorrow, and that was something that obviously is very important to the world. But we'll have other visits, and we'll work very hard with Kim Jong-un and with everybody on getting things straightened out.
At the APEC CEO Summit, Trump said America's success fuels prosperity across the Pacific.
When America thrives, our partners thrive, and our alliances thrive.
The president says his administration has rejected the old model of incompetent government that punished success and rewarded failure.
We're rewarding those who build and create and hire and invest in the USA, and we're making America the best place on earth to do business.
On social media, the president addressed speculation about a meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, saying, quote, "For those asking, we didn't come to South Korea to see Canada." Trump's arrival in South Korea came about 90 minutes late, following North Korea's announcement that it had test-fired a new cruise missile earlier in the day. The president downplayed the launch, calling it just one more missile from Kim Jong-un, and emphasized his good relationship with the North Korean leader. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
President Trump in South Korea today providing an update on trade negotiations with the key American ally, saying a trade deal has been reached.
I'd like to thank everybody. I know you all either reasonably well or very well. And we had a tremendous meeting today with South Korea. I think the meeting was determined, very much determined. And we made our deal. We pretty much finalized a trade deal. And we discussed some other things having to do with national security, etc. And I think we came to a conclusion on a lot of very important items.
우선 2천억 불은
The $200 billion package is structured similarly to Japan's $550 billion financial package agreed upon with the U.S.
투자 상한을 200억
Trump and President Lee Jae-myung agreed that Seoul can split up its promised $350 billion investment fund. $200 billion in cash would be paid in yearly installments, capped at $20 billion. The other $150 billion is to be spent on investments in shipbuilding, which South Korea has promised to help Trump restore. Mutual tariffs will stay at 15%, while tariffs on South Korean cars and auto parts will also be reduced to 15%. Korean companies will take the lead in the shipbuilding initiatives. Meanwhile, aboard Air Force One today, Trump hinted at lowering fentanyl tariffs on Chinese imports.
I expect to be lowering that because I believe that they're going to help us with the fentanyl situation. They're going to be doing what they can do.
And on the rare earth terms, sir, do you need to see more than just a one-year delay? Is that sufficient to make other concessions?
I don't know. We haven't talked about the timing yet, but we're going to work out something. We're doing very well with rare earth, as you know, and I think, we're going to make a big step with fentanyl. The thing with fentanyl, the border is now so tight, it's much tougher for them. We've been doing very well with that.
Trump suggested the U.S. could reduce those tariffs ahead of his meeting tomorrow with Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping in South Korea. Trump did not provide details on how China would help curb the flow of fentanyl precursors into the United States. He says he intends to address the matter with Xi during their meeting. The White House says Trump will meet Xi at 11 a.m. local time on Thursday. That's 10 p.m. Eastern tonight. The president also discussed the fact that he can't run for a third term. He said his poll numbers are the highest numbers he's ever had. He also said he ended 8 wars and the U.S. has the greatest economy in history, adding that energy prices are also down significantly. Here he is discussing the economy.
The only thing that's not down is the stock prices. And 401ks are through the roof. Everyone's 401ks hitting records. So we have the greatest economy we've ever had. I have my highest poll numbers that I've ever had. And, you know, based on what I read, I guess I'm not allowed to run. So we'll see what happens.
Johnson says you're trolling when you talk about a third term.
Well, I don't think he said that. I don't think he'd use that term. But it's a very interesting thing. I have the best numbers for any president in many years, any president. And I would say that if you read it, it's pretty clear. I'm not allowed to run. It's too bad.
House Speaker Mike Johnson yesterday said there's no way to amend the Constitution to allow Trump to run for a third term. That's because it requires a lengthy ratification process. Johnson said there were no plans to amend the 22nd Amendment before 2028. The amendment allowed Franklin D. Roosevelt's fourth-term presidency. The amendment process needs approval by 2/3 of both the House and Senate, and then ratification by 3/4 of the states, or 38 states. Johnson remarked that he sees no path for that. Meanwhile, Trump was asked aboard Air Force One whether the Gaza ceasefire will hold.
Nothing's going to jeopardize. You have to understand, Hamas is a very small part of peace in the Middle East. And they have to behave. They're on the rough side, but they said they would be good. And if they're good, they're going to be happy. And if they're not good, they're going to be terminated. Their lives will be terminated. And they understand that. No, that's a very strong piece. Hamas is a small thing, but they kill people. They grew up killing people, and I guess they don't stop. But nobody knows what happened to the Israeli soldier, but they say it was sniper fire, and it was retribution for that, and I think they have a right to do that.
Trump's comments come after Israel conducted strikes on targets in Gaza last night. According to the Hamas-run health authority, the attack killed over 100 people. That number has not been independently verified. Israel says acted after an attack by Hamas terrorists killed 1 soldier. Both Israel and Hamas trade blame for violations of the ceasefire. The Israeli military announced it will continue to uphold the truce agreement, but respond firmly to any violation. And Israel released a video appearing to show that Hamas staged the discovery of bodies to seized hostages. According to Israel, Hamas planted the remains of an Israeli hostage at an excavation site before calling in a Red Cross team and pretending it had found a missing hostage. War Secretary Pete Hegseth in Japan today. He described the relationship between the United States and Tokyo as critical in keeping both countries safe and responding to threats from communist China.
To strengthen the alliance, we need to continue building strong, lethal, combat-credible forces that are ready to deter war and, if necessary, fight and fight to win. China's unprecedented military buildup and its aggressive military actions speak for themselves. That's why President Trump's peace through strength agenda is so important. We don't have to stand here and tell Japan what it needs to do, because we both look out at the world and see the threat of a Chinese military buildup, and we see the threat to free people, and we have to defend our own countries and stand alongside each other. And so I think President Trump does an incredibly good job, better than anyone else on planet Earth, of bringing alongside other countries and saying, let's do this together.
Hegseth also called for an early implementation of Japan's plan to increase defense spending. Japan regards the security environment surrounding the country as the gravest since the end of World War II. That's partially because of China's military expansion and North Korea's missile and nuclear programs. Anti-CCP sentiment running high today in South Korea. Protesters gathered to oppose Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping's visit there for the APEC summit. The protesters held signs, wore costumes, and waved flags reading lies and deception out to voice their resistance to the Chinese regime. Meanwhile, China today said it absolutely will not rule out using force over Taiwan. Beijing is striking a much tougher tone than a series of articles in state media this week that pledged benign rule if the island comes over to Beijing. Here's the organizer of the rally against the CCP.
South Korea seems to be working well now as a democratic country, but there are so many contradictions and a government that lacks legitimacy. It is never the will of the people that this government is acting pro-China. The people are still trying to promote friendship with Western world free countries. They want it. They don't want communism.
A protester said the current Korean government should be blamed for the high tariff imposed on the country, as it has not shown belief and trust in the United States. Traders and investors on both sides of the Pacific hope the sit-down will ease months of trade tensions. House Republicans released a report claiming the Biden administration's use of an auto pen shows Joe Biden wasn't actually making decisions while president. Joining us to discuss is Bobby Ann Cox, civil rights attorney, fellow at the Brownstone Institute, and legal analyst. So Bobby Ann, always great to see you. Good afternoon. There is precedent of using the auto pen by past presidents. So in this case, Republicans allege former President Biden's mental decline was covered up. So some of his executive actions should be canceled out. So my question to you is, does a president's cognitive abilities factor into the legality of authorizing the auto pen?
Well, sure. Yes, it does. I mean, if you have somebody that's waning in their mental capacity and they're not really aware of what they're doing, and they're signing legal documents with the power and the force of the presidency of the United States, then obviously, yes, their mental capacity does come into question. Their mental capacity is an issue, and that's exactly what this investigation by this House committee was doing. You know, they were looking into, in particular, President Biden's mental capacity and his use of the auto pen, which is basically a machine that signs someone's signature, and whether or not he knew what was being signed by auto pen, whether or not he authorized what was being signed by auto pen. And this investigation was very detailed that the House Oversight Committee performed. They just issued their report yesterday, and basically it says that this was a huge problem, and they had multiple witnesses testified. I believe they had depositions, 47 hours worth of depositions that they went through in this investigation. So it was very detailed. But, you know, they were interviewing people that were close to Biden during his presidency, who were working with him and for him in the White House. And a lot of that testimony is showing that, you know, there were instances where people did not even speak to President Biden before having the authority to use the auto pen. And these were things that were, second and third hand conversations without the person actually talking to Biden to confirm that he was authorizing certain signatures by auto pen. So yes, this is a big problem, and this certainly can lead to some legal challenges and ramifications hereafter.
So those things detailed in the report, does that constitute as evidence? Can I ask you what kind of proof would be needed to show that an executive order was not personally approved by the president?
Right. So, you do need to have some sort of evidence. If you don't have any sort of a paper trail at all, showing that the president authorized something to be signed and have his name affixed to a legal document. You don't have any emails, showing his authorization. You don't have any recorded phone conversations. You don't have any text messages showing that he authorized this, or even that it was discussed and he gave the approval. If you don't have any evidence to back up any of these things that were signed by AutoPen, that really opens the door to the question of, well, if he didn't authorize it, we can't prove that he authorized it. Who did authorize it? And these testimonies that were given during this oversight hearing committee investigation certainly could be used as evidence. I mean, when you give a deposition, you do have to, swear an oath that you will tell the truth and the whole truth. And so that can become evidence if this is going to turn into either an investigation by the Department of Justice or if legal action is going to be taken at some point down the road. Yes, for certain, they can use some of this testimony that was given during this investigation because, as I said, those people were testifying under oath. So use it as evidence to find out, what is the truth, what was going on, what did Biden know and not know, and see if there was something that was illegal going on, because you cannot affix the signature of the president to a legal document without having specific authorization from the president. That would be an illegal move and unconstitutional. Our Constitution is clear. Certain actions are taken by the president, not to be delegated to other people or other branches of the government. So it is a serious question, absolutely.
So what would be the legal consequences if it is, in fact, found that these executive actions were unauthorized?
Right. So, this means that if President Biden did not authorize the use of his signature by AutoPen on certain documents, whatever those documents are, whatever they say, would not actually have legal value. So, for example, it has been shown that Biden used the AutoPen, or someone perhaps used the AutoPen to sign his name to things like pardons and things like laws, bills that then became law once he signed his name or the AutoPen signed his name. And also just regular executive actions. I mean, if you think about it, there are a lot of things that the president does and has the power to do. For example, appointing federal judges. Only the president can appoint federal judges, and those are lifelong appointments. And that's at all the levels of federal court, right? So you've got the trial court level, you've got the appellate court level, and then you've got the Supreme Court level. Those are positions that are appointed by Biden, in this instance, by the President of the United States. So if the AutoPen was deemed to be authorized by someone other than him, then all of these things that that were signed by AutoPen that he did not authorize would not have legal validity, which means the pardons would not be valid. the laws he signed or were signed by AutoPen without his authorization would not be valid. And any of the other executive functions, like I said, appointing federal judges is another big issue. So yes, those things, if they weren't actually authorized by the president, would not have any legal effect.
So I asked you earlier that past presidents have used the AutoPen. So I'm not a legal expert here. Can you just clarify for us, does a document signed by AutoPen carry the same authority as one physically signed by the president?
That is a great question. It actually has not been litigated thus far in our nation's history. There is not any sort of a Supreme Court decision specifically about AutoPens and the validity of AutoPens. The AutoPen was first used back in 2011 by President Obama, who was abroad at the time of the passing of a bill by Congress, and he wanted to sign the bill, but he was in Europe at the time and couldn't sign the bill until he came back to the United States. So that was the first time that a president authorized the use of the AutoPen machine to sign their name to a legal document. So that was back in 2011. Here we are in 2025, so it hasn't been that long that presidents have used AutoPens, but since we don't have a Supreme Court decision saying whether or not the use of the AutoPen is legal and does have a binding effect, like a regular wet signature by the president himself, that is still something that is being debated. I mean, you have people on both sides arguing, some are arguing that absolutely it is a legal way to sign a document by using the AutoPen. And then you have others that say, no, there's nothing in the Constitution that says that the president can delegate the authority for his signature on a legal document. And that delegation is either to another human being or to a machine to sign his name. So we have both sides arguing opposite sides of that question. Is it legal? We don't know. But that's something that perhaps we would see SCOTUS make a decision on, if there is a legal challenge and it is accepted by the courts.
All right, so Bobby, just finally, generally speaking, under what circumstances is using an AutoPen legally permitted and when is it not?
Well, with the case of the president, what we're seeing in this specific investigation, some in the media and some critics of this investigation into Biden's use of the AutoPen are saying, well, a lot of other presidents used it. Obama used it, Trump has used it, Biden used it. True, yes. Now, President Trump has stated that he, too, has used the AutoPen, but not for legal documents like signing laws or issuing a pardon, more for things like, signing a letter or an invitation to something. And the question and the main focus of what this House Oversight Committee just investigated with regards to President Biden, they were really focusing on the end of his presidency, the last 3 months or so. And the fact is that if you look at the number of pardons that Biden issued in his presidency, which was only 4 years long, he issued over 4,000 pardons, many of which apparently were signed by AutoPen. And when you compare that to other presidents before him, thus far, President Trump has issued in his first term, and then now in 2025, approximately 1,700 pardons. Barack Obama issued something like 1,900 pardons, and he was president for 8 years. So I think George W. Bush, Bush too, I think he only issued a couple hundred pardons during his presidency. So we see with Biden issuing over 4,200 pardons in just 4 years, many of which were issued, in the last 3 months of his presidency. This is why they've been investigating this in particular with the auto pen, because the question has to be asked, how can this president have issued 2 and 3 and sometimes 4 times as many pardons as his predecessors? So this is really what raised the red flag, I believe, and why the House Oversight Committee paid so much attention, or is paying so much attention, to the auto pen use on signing pardons. So yeah, this is a really, it's a big problem because according to the testimony and the report that was issued yesterday by the House committee, there is not much, if any, at all, evidence showing that Biden authorized the use of the auto pen with a lot of these signatures. So yes, this is a serious issue, and we're going to have to see how this plays out now that the Department of Justice has said that they're going to investigate it themselves.
Yeah, we'll follow this closely, but imagine signing over 4,000 documents. That's a lot of signatures. Well, Bobby, I thank you for coming on to talk to us about this today.
Yes, thank you for having me. Have a great day.
You as well. The government shutdown becoming more painful for regular Americans. What are the latest messages from Republican and Democratic leaders? Stay tuned.
A performance that truly matters for each and every one of us. This is what you've been waiting for. Get tickets now at shenyun.com.
Is deep sea fish oil really healthy? Due to pollution in the oceans, most fish contain heavy metal elements and radioactive substances. That's why it's so important to choose a pure source of omega-3. Puritan Green Vegetable Omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds, which are rich in nutrients and minerals. It effectively improves brain power and is beneficial to the heart's health. Puritan Green Vegetable Omega-3. Eat 2 a day and you'll feel brand new.
Don't wait. Call now to find out about our Medicare plan.
Why do we have to sit through so many Medicare commercials this time of year? It's endless.
Good question, Edith. I'm glad you asked. We see so many commercials this time of year because it's the only time, other than special circumstances, when Medicare recipients can change their plan for Part C. Original Medicare only covers Parts A and B, but a Medicare Advantage plan has additional benefits that Original Medicare doesn't offer.
So now's the time to fill those spaces?
That's right, Archie. And every year, there are changes to what benefits you may receive from your Part C plan. Call right now to find out what plan best suits your needs.
It's easy, easy, don't delay. Pick up the phone and call today.
Call now for your free Medicare review.
1-833-469-1754. 1-833-469-1754.
You may now return to your regularly scheduled programming.
I trod on my glasses yesterday, and I had to pay up front for a new pair that I can't even pick up for another 10 days. So I looked for another way, and I found Select Specs. I ordered online. My new glasses just arrived this morning, and I can pay over the next few weeks. This is the way to buy glasses.
See now, pay later with Select Specs. Next day delivery and deferred payment options. Only at selectspecs.com.
Come to Mathis Home today and save with Black Friday deals all over the store. They have the largest selection of bedrooms in the styles you like at the prices you'll love. This metal bed with a matte black finish is a classic with a modern flair. Black Friday priced at just $2.99. Check out this upholstered bed covered in an ultra plush fabric. It's a hot buy at just $2.99. They're all in stock now, so you can get fast delivery absolutely free. For style and value, shop the Black Friday deals at your furniture superstore, Mathis Home.
The Federal Reserve cut interest rates by 1/4 point today following this week's policy meeting. The reduction marks the central bank's lowest rate in 3 years. The decision would bring the benchmark federal funds rate to a new target range of 3.75 to 4%, Earlier this month, Fed Chair Jerome Powell signaled more easing in response to a weakening labor market and the economic risks of waiting. Last week, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that annual inflation for consumer prices had inched up to 3% in September. The Fed's current inflation target is 2%. The government shutdown is growing more painful for regular Americans. Republicans and Democratic leaders are speaking as the situation intensifies.
You will note that more air traffic controllers and TSA agents and park rangers are about to go without a paycheck. You've got families and children that rely upon SNAP benefits that are going to go hungry here at the end of the week. You've got more critical workers, by the way, including the people who are the stewards of our nuclear defense arsenal, who are forced to stay at home as the government remains closed.
This Friday, as window shopping occurs, window shopping starts today, tens of millions of American families are going to gather around the kitchen table and say, what are we going to do? We can't afford an extra $10,000 or $20,000 a year. But we can't go without health care. What if our kid or our partner gets sick and there's no doctor? Or what if we have to cut back so badly on our health care that we have to go to a doctor 100 miles away or a hospital 200 miles away? What are we going to do?
The Republican leadership thanked essential workers who are still on the job without pay. They pointed out that the largest union of federal workers, as well as the National Association of Air Traffic Controllers, have come out this week urging Democrats to pass their short-term funding bill. Meanwhile, Democratic leadership accused Republicans of refusing affordable health care for Americans. They said Republicans, including President Trump, should come to the negotiating table on health care. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell is holding a news conference right now after announcing the Fed's policy decision. Let's take a look.
Although some important federal government data have been delayed due to the shutdown, the public and private sector data that have remained available suggests that the outlook for employment and inflation has not changed much since our meeting in September. Conditions in the labor market appear to be gradually cooling, and inflation remains somewhat elevated. In support of our goals and in light of the balance of risks to employment and inflation, today the Federal Open Market Committee decided to lower our policy interest rate by 1/4 percentage point. We also decided to conclude the reduction of our aggregate securities holdings as of December 1. I will have more to say about monetary policy after briefly reviewing economic developments. Available indicators suggest that economic activity has been expanding at a moderate pace. GDP rose at a 1.6% pace in the first half of the year, down from 2.4% last year. Data available prior to the shutdown show that growth in economic activity may be on a somewhat firmer trajectory than expected, primarily reflecting stronger consumer spending. Business investment in equipment and intangibles has continued to expand, while activity in the housing sector remains weak. The shutdown of the federal government will weigh on economic activity while it persists, but these effects should reverse after the shutdown ends. In the labor market, the unemployment rate remained relatively low through August. Job gains have slowed significantly since earlier in the year. A good part of the slowing likely reflects a decline in the growth of the labor force due to lower immigration and labor force participation, though labor demand has clearly softened as well. Although official employment data for September are delayed, available evidence suggests that both layoffs and hiring remain low, and that both households' perceptions of job availability and firms' perceptions of hiring difficulty continue to decline. In this less dynamic and somewhat softer labor market, the downside risks to employment appear to have risen in recent months. Inflation has eased significantly from its highs in mid-2022, but remains somewhat elevated relative to our 2% longer-run goal. Estimates based on the Consumer Price Index suggest that total PCE prices rose 2.8% over the 12 months ending in September, and that, excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 2.8% as well. These readings are higher than earlier in the year as inflation for goods has picked up. In contrast, disinflation appears to be continuing for services. Near-term measures of inflation expectations have moved up on balance over the course of this year on news about tariffs, as reflected in both market and survey-based measures. Beyond the next year or two or so, however, most measures of longer-term expectations remain consistent with our 2% inflation goal. Our monetary policy actions are guided by our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. At today's meeting, the committee decided to lower the target range for the federal funds rate by a 1/4 percentage point to 3.75% to 4%. Higher tariffs are pushing up prices in some categories of goods, resulting in higher overall inflation. A reasonable base case is that the effects on inflation will be relatively short-lived, a one-time shift in the price level. But it is also possible that the inflationary effects could instead be more persistent, and that is a risk to be assessed and managed. Our obligation is to ensure that a one-time increase in the price level does not become an ongoing inflation problem. In the near term, risks to inflation are tilted to the upside and risks to employment to the downside, a challenging situation. There is no risk-free path for policy as we navigate this tension between our employment and inflation goals. Our framework calls for us to take a balanced approach in promoting both sides of our dual mandate. With downside risks to employment having increased in recent months, the balance of risks has shifted. Accordingly, we judged it appropriate at this meeting to take another step toward a more neutral policy stance. With today's decision, we remain well positioned to respond in a timely way to potential economic developments. We will continue to determine the appropriate stance of monetary policy based on the incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. We continue to face two-sided risks. In the committee's discussions at this meeting, there were strongly differing views about how to proceed in December. A further reduction in the policy rate at the December meeting is not a foregone conclusion. Far from it. Policy is not on a preset course. At today's meeting, the committee also decided to conclude the reduction of our aggregate securities holdings as of December 1. Our long-stated plan has been to stop balance sheet runoff when reserves are somewhat above the level we judge consistent with ample reserve conditions. Signs have clearly emerged that we have reached that standard. In money markets, repo rates have moved up relative to our administered rates, and we have seen more notable pressures on selected dates, along with more use of our standing repo facility. In addition, the effective federal funds rate has begun to move up relative to the rate of interest on reserve balances. These developments are what we expected to see as the size of our balance sheet declined and warrant today's decision to cease.
And that was Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell announcing that the Fed has lowered its benchmark interest rate by a 1/4 point, now to the range of 3.75 to 4%, and saying the effects of the government shutdown on the economy will reverse once the shutdown is over. Next, President Trump will meet with Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping. He says he plans to raise the issues of Taiwan and Jimmy Lai, imprisoned Hong Kong pro-democracy activist, among other things. Joining us to discuss is Declan Gangley, entrepreneur and businessman and friend of Jimmy Lai. So Declan, good afternoon to you. Thank you for coming on the show. Now, as you know, a bipartisan group of 38 U.S. senators sent a letter urging Trump to secure the release of Jimmy Lai. So, I mean, what is the CCP afraid of that it imprisoned Jimmy Lai and many others like him?
Well, Jimmy is a champion of democracy in Hong Kong. He has become a symbol of freedom and of resistance, if you will, to the iron fist of the Communist Party of China. That said, he has been in jail and in solitary confinement for an extremely long period of time. And I think really what the Chinese Communist Party leadership needs to decide is if they want to make Jimmy Lai a martyr forever. Because something to remember about Jimmy is a Christian, a devout Christian, and in the concept of Christian martyrdom begins not during life, but at death. You're a hero while you're alive. You become a martyr from the moment that you die. And if they allow Jimmy and they make Jimmy die in prison, they will have created a martyr whose name will live on for 1,000 years. And his example and his as a heroic Christian example of Christian integrity and fortitude. And so my hope is that what we are going to see is that the Communist Party of China and Xi Jinping sees sense and sees that the sensible thing to do is to release Jimmy Lai, allow him to go back to his family, allow him to leave Hong Kong if that's what he wants to do, and to enjoy during his, whatever time he has left here on earth, to be able to spend that time with his family and with those that he loves. Really, they have the power. They have shown that they have the power. And President Trump is perhaps the only person in the world, aside from Chairman Xi, who has the power and the ability to get Jimmy Lai out of prison and bring him back to his family. And I hope and pray that that is what happens.
So on that note, from your perspective, why is it important for President Trump to raise human rights issues related to trade talks with China?
Well, because ultimately, and President Trump knows this very well, of course, he doesn't need any lessons from any of us. The Communist Party of China is an oppressor of personal freedom. The Communist Party of China wants to be able to trade with the free world, with democracies, with no price tag attached to that, with no conditions attached to that. And of course, democracies throughout the world, there are conditions to be able to engage with trade, with free trade, and we passionately believe in free trade, that Western democracies do believe in free trade, but it's not at any price and under any circumstances. And that's something that President Trump has made clear, both with his tariff policy with respect to China. And I expect, and I don't know this, but I expect that a gesture like the release of Jimmy Lai can only help contribute to a more favorable and conducive environment to being able to engage in the types of business and trade that a place like China wants to do. I don't know that, but it certainly can't hurt. It can only help.
Do you think the CCP is capable of fundamentally changing its behavior?
Personally, no. But I'm not I'm a businessman. I'm an entrepreneur. I have purposefully never done business in China, and that option was open to me for the last few decades, and I've never done it because I had dealings many, many years ago, up until the year 1997, and in fact 2000, in the former Soviet Union, and I saw firsthand what the consequences are of Communist Party dictatorship and leadership, and I have a very firm view of what to expect from Communist Party cadres. I'm always willing to be proven wrong and be confounded, and releasing Jimmy Lai would be one of those things that would somewhat confound me, but it hasn't happened yet. And if Communist Party of China wants the world to take a different view or look at it in a different way, then it certainly needs to change the way that it's doing things, including locking up political prisoners like Jimmy Lai.
So, Declan, as we mentioned earlier, you are friends with Jimmy Lai. So I want to ask you this. What did he mean when he said previously that he was ready to go to prison for his beliefs? What are those beliefs? And tell us what kind of person he is.
To understand Jimmy Lai, and look, many of your viewers may not understand this, and I get that, but to understand Jimmy Lai, there's been a very good book written about him, by the way, but you have to understand Catholicism. And the concept of Catholic martyrdom and the path to sainthood, because Jimmy has, in the Christian Catholic concept, he has taken up his cross, and he is making a sacrifice and taking on a massive burden for it, in the interest of setting an example of Christian virtue, Christian heroic virtue. And the examples that Jimmy will be drawing upon will be saints like Saint Thomas More, who stood up to then King Henry VIII in England many centuries ago and defied the king and was executed for it. He went to the Tower of London and he was beheaded for standing up for what he saw as being the truth and something that was worth going to the scaffold for or dying for. So this example of self-sacrifice, of in the Christian concept of taking up your cross and willingly enter into suffering in order to create an example of virtue, of heroic virtue, that is what Jimmy is doing. And the examples that he looks to are the saints of the Christian church, of the Catholic Church, who for centuries have made these kind of sacrifices in order to become and give examples of human virtue and freedom.
If Jimmy Lai becomes a martyr, of course, none of us are hoping for that. We're all hoping that he gets released from prison. But if it does happen, how much do you think that's going to influence people to mobilize, to come together? Because recently we've seen the passing of Charlie Kirk in the United States. It has led to his movement becoming much bigger than when he was alive. But do you see that happening within the context of the CCP and Hong Kong?
I do. And Jimmy, if they turn him into a martyr, he will be much bigger as a martyr and even bigger as a martyr than he is today. And it will not be something that will last for a year or 2 years or 5 years. It will last for centuries. He will build what is called, in the Christian concept, a cultus, and that is a following of people who will look to him and the example that he set of heroic Christian virtue. And he will be somebody that will be remembered. I just referenced to you Saint Thomas More. Thomas More was the Chancellor of England. He was the equivalent of what we today would call the Prime Minister. He was the first minister of the king. And yet, for Christian reasons, he defied the king. And we are still talking about him today. And he went to the Tower of London and to his execution before or during the Reformation in England, which is centuries and centuries ago. They're still talking about him today.
Declan, is it possible for Washington to pursue economic interests with Beijing while still holding China accountable for its human rights violations?
Look, this is above my pay grade. It's a very, very fine line to walk. There's an extremely talented team of people in Washington, D.C. and on the China desk, if I can call it that are working this issue. And if I trust any administration, any government to be able to find that fine line, to thread that needle, I trust the Trump administration to do it.
Okay, just finally, Declan, and I understand you've been outspoken on the Chinese regime for decades now. Can you just point out to one thing? What would you like to see come out of Trump's meeting with Xi Jinping tonight?
What I would hope for is not something that's going to be happening. As a young man, I had visited the Soviet Union. I saw the Berlin Wall come down. I saw the Soviet Union and the Communist Party of the Soviet Union retire. I would like to see a free and democratic China. And I still believe, and I dream and I pray that during the course of my lifetime, that is something that we will see, that a free China, that the Communist Party of China dissolves itself, that it creates a real vibrant democracy. We know that it works in Chinese culture because we can see it in Taiwan. And China, if it did that, would become the workshop of the world, the economic powerhouse of the world. I do not wish China ill. I wish it enormous success. It is certainly a contender for true global leadership over the course of the next century. But with this millstone of the Communist Party system around its neck, it is never going to reach its full potential. And I hope that eventually we will see the Chinese people and even maybe Chinese leadership decide to walk away from this structure and embrace a whole new approach for a new and free China.
Well, Declan, I have to say this was a very engaging conversation. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Ron DeSantis has directed Florida's Board of Governors to crack down on H-1B visa abuse in higher education. The Florida governor also announced a partnership with the federal government to cancel or repurpose millions of dollars in DEI-related grants. DeSantis said in a statement, quote, universities across the country are importing foreign workers on H-1B visas instead of hiring Americans who are qualified and available to do the job. The new directive requires taxpayer-funded institutions in Florida to prioritize American graduates. Proponents of H-1B visas argued that they're necessary to hire individuals for specialty occupations. Opponents say the visas give foreign workers an advantage over Americans. Last month, President Donald Trump announced a $100,000 fee for employees petitioning for new H-1B visas. Taking a break now, in Paris, 2 men have been arrested over the daring Louvre heist, partially admitting their role. We have more news after this break.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senators Chuck Grassley and Ron Johnson are holding a press conference about the Biden-era Justice Department's 2020 election interference investigation. Let's tune in.
I've recently been informed by Verizon that at least 11 members with Verizon accounts were affected. That includes a hard line for Senator Cruz's office and a staffer's cell phone for former Senator Loeffler. AT&T informed me they challenged the legal basis for Jack Smith's efforts, and Smith backed down. So today, we're making public new records that I've obtained through legally protected whistleblower disclosures. 197 subpoenas were issued by Jack Smith and his team. These subpoenas were issued to 34 individuals and 163 businesses, including financial institutions. And one of the points of contact On many of these subpoenas was that person I previously named Special Agent Walter Giardino. The subpoena requested records and communications related to over 430 individual and organizations. All of them appear to be aimed at Republicans. A subpoena to Event Strategies requested records relating to Turning Point USA and the Republican Attorney General's Association. One subpoena to Apple sought records relating to Trump and the January 6th prison choir. Earlier this year, I obtained emails between and among J.P. Cooney, one of Jack Smith's prosecutors. That email exchange was March 2023 about a partisan news article on January 6th, and this is what Cooney said in the email. Can we do some work to nail down Trump's role in this, perhaps with the same process on Ed Henry's LLC, end quote. Just the next month, April 2023, Jack Smith and his team subpoenaed Apple for records relating to the very issue. A subpoena to an individual sought records and communications with, quote, any member, employee, or agent of the legislative branch of government, end of quote. Another subpoena to an individual sought records relating to communications with media companies such as CBS, Fox News, Fox Business, Newsmax, Sinclair, and others. Other subpoenas to a bank, individual, and businesses sought records relating to White House advisors Stephen Miller, Dan Scavino, Jared Kushner, and Lara Trump. Some subpoenas to individuals and businesses sought statistical data and analysis relating to donors and fundraising efforts. Arctic Frost was the vehicle by which FBI agents and DOJ prosecutors could improperly investigate the entire Republican political apparatus. Contrary to what Smith has said publicly, this was clearly a fishing expedition. If this had happened to Democrats, they'd be as rightly outraged as we are outraged. We're making these records public in the interest of transparency and so that the American people can draw their own conclusions. Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley. I want to thank the chairman. I want to thank his staff for their tenacity and their cooperation in all of our joint investigations. I think it's important to note that the records that we are now making public and for personal transparency were not obtained from the agency. They were obtained through a whistleblower. So my first point is we need more whistleblowers. We need people, men and women inside these agencies who have integrity, who want to see the integrity and credibility of the Department of Justice, of the FBI restored, come forward. Because right now I think Kash Patel, Pam Bondi are overwhelmed by all the messes they're trying to clean up. The agencies have been, lost a lot of personnel. People simply couldn't serve the